All right, class. In this lesson, our learning objectives are going to be determining and interpreting cumulative frequency. We're going to also do the same thing with relative frequency and then relative cumulative frequency. And then we're going to model a situation using a spreadsheet. So in this lesson, we're going to do a lot of spreadsheet work. So you want to pay attention at what goes on in the screen and the formulas that are being entered. And then we're going to determine and interpret percentiles. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the first example. And in this example, we are trying to determine how many of the trips listed below, in this table below, that were less than 1,000 miles. Okay, number of trips that were less than 1,000 miles. So if you take a look at this chart, okay, we have this first column labeled long distance miles, and we have categories like miles that are between 50 and 250 miles, 250 to 500, 500 to 1,000, and greater than 1,000. And here in the second column represents the number of trips, or long distance summer trips taken. And so we have 512,460,000 being taken where the trips were between 50 and 250 miles, and then here are the numbers for the other category. Okay, so hopefully you have a better understanding of this chart. When you're given a chart, you need to take some time to really understand what's going on, because there's a lot of information, and so it takes a little time to absorb it. So now that we have a better understanding of what's going on, we want to know how many of the trips listed in this chart were less than 1,000 miles. Okay, so that really means it is the sum of this number, and that number. Okay, because this number represents trips that were greater than or equal to 1,000 miles. So we would not include that category. Okay, now since there are only three numbers, it's pretty easy to type that in to the calculator to calculate the answer. However, when you get in a situation where there are more numbers, or when these numbers are kind of large to enter into the calculator, using a spreadsheet becomes very helpful. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and flip over to the spreadsheet, and you will see here the same type of chart over here. Same type of chart, and what we want to do is find the cumulative, okay, the cumulative number of trips. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is enter a value in cell D3. So we're going to type in, we're going to make sure this cell is highlighted, so you see this blue box is highlighting D3, and we're going to hit equal sign, indicating that we're going to put in a formula, and we want this cell to represent or be equal to cell C3. So we're going to tap on C3, and you'll notice down in the lower left it says equals C3. Okay, and when we hit enter, we're going to see that the same exact number shows up. Okay, so now we want the next cell, which is D4, to be the sum of 512 million and 72,270,000. Okay, so what we want to do is hit equal sign again, and we're going to take cell C4 this time and add it to not C3 but D3. Okay, because D3 will become our running total. So here's what I mean. So when I hit enter, oh, that didn't work. Let's go ahead and type that again. It's going to be cell C4 plus, forgot to put in the plus sign, D3. Okay, now you'll see this new number, 584 million, is really the sum of 512 million and 72 million. Okay, so what's the beauty of having this equation is now I can just copy cell D4 and I could paste it to the remaining cells, and you'll see that because of the way the equation is set up, it automatically calculates a cumulative sum. Okay, so I've got cell D5 highlighted. You'll notice down in the lower left it says it's equal to C5 plus D4. Okay, so C5 is that 32.8 million, and D4 is the 584.7 million. That is the running total. Remember I said you don't want to add it to C4 because C4 is not a running total. Okay, so then our answer here is anything, a trip, the number of trips that were taken that's less than 1,000 miles was 617,580,000. Okay, so the answer here is 617,580,000 trips. That is the answer for example 1. All right, so let's go ahead to example 2. Here we have Expedia reporting the following airfare booking expenses for the week of July 4th. We all know that July 4th is a busy travel period. And the question here is, what proportion of the tickets sold had a cost greater than or equal to $400 and less than or equal to $499.99? Okay, so let's take a look at the chart, spend some time understanding this. So we have this first column, which represents round-trip airline ticket costs. Okay, so here are the range of prices, and it's broken out by hundreds, going all the way up to 1,000. So anything 1,000 and above would be in that category. And then in the next column, which represents the number of bookings or number of tickets sold, here are the numbers. Okay, so the question is, what proportion, okay, we're going to come back to that, of the tickets sold had a cost greater than or equal to $400 and less than or equal to $499.99. So that's right here. Okay, this is equal to 400, greater than or 400, and less than or equal to $499.99. So we're looking at this number here, 282. Okay, now let's go back to this proportion. When we talk about a proportion, we want to know the proportion of 282 as a proportion to all of these trips put together. Okay, so we're going to need to sum all of these and then find the proportion or the percentage of 282 that is of this sum. Okay, so let's go back to the chart. And I have the same chart here. So what we want to do is find the sum of column G, all of these numbers in column G. Okay, so I'm going to highlight cell G13, okay, because I want to put an equation there, and I'm going to add all of these up. And there's a formula that'll quickly add all of these up, and that is equals sum, okay, and then I'm going to put a parenthesis here, and I'm going to highlight cell G3, and then in the lower right hand corner, you see that little green dot. I'm going to just drag it all the way down to the last number. I'm going to put a close parentheses. I'm going to delete this comma here. If you take a look at the lower left part of the screen, I'm going to delete that comma, and I'm going to hit enter. And now you'll see that the total is 1434, or 1,434. Okay, and we want to know what that percentage is. Okay, well, there's an easy way to calculate that percentage. We're going to go to column H and calculate the relative frequency, because that's the percentage. We're going to get a percentage for every single row. Okay, so we're going to go to cell H3, and I'm going to say this is equal to 70, or G3, divided by G13. Okay, G3 divided by G13. Now, we also want to lock this cell, because when I copy this cell to the rest of the cells in column H, I don't want G13 to become G14, G15, G16. I want it to be G13, always G13. Okay, so I'm going to, if you take a look at the lower left-hand corner of the screen, between G and 13, I'm going to put in a $sign. That $sign says lock in row 13. So no matter where I move my copy paste, it will always be row 13. Okay, so I can go ahead and hit enter here. And then I can go ahead and copy cell H3. Okay, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste the rest of this down here, and you'll see it automatically calculate my percentage. Okay, now the question was asking us about this row right here, 400 to 499, or 282 bookings, and that represents 19.67%. So the answer for the proportion right here is 19.67%. Okay, that is the proportion. Okay, so let's go ahead to the next example. And it's asking us to write the spreadsheet formula that would find the sum of the relative frequencies and enter that calculated amount in a cell in the spreadsheet. Okay, so we've already done that. Okay, so we found the sum of the number of bookings. Actually, let me correct that. The sum of the relative frequencies is not what I just showed you, number of bookings. We want the cumulative frequency, okay, and we want to add this up. So we want to look at column I, and this cumulative frequency, we're going to add the cumulative frequency similar to what we did over here in column D. Okay, so cell I3 is going to equal cell G3, okay, and there's no sum because that's the starting amount, so we're going to say that's equal to G3. And then in cell I4, we're going to say this is equal to G4 plus I3. Okay, and you hit enter, and now it's going to sum 70 in I3 to 120 in G4. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and copy this cell to the rest of the cell in this column I, and it'll give us a running tally. Okay, and notice that this sum in I12, 1,434, is the same number that we calculated in cell G13. Okay, the only difference is in this column I, this is a running total. Okay, 70, 190, 500, that is our running total. Okay, so we finished example number 3. Now we're going to go to example number 4. Now we're going to extend the relative frequency table to determine the percent of Expedia's bookings that are below $600. Okay, we're going to extend the relative frequency table to determine the percent of Expedia's bookings that are below $600. Okay, so to calculate that, we have to take the percentage of I3 relative to I12. Okay, and we're going to do that for each one of the cells in column I. So in other words, we're going to go to column J. This is our relative cumulative frequency. And we're going to say that that is equal to I3 divided by I12. Okay, now we want to lock in I12 because when we do our copy paste, we don't want I12 to become I13, I14. So we have to go and move and put in a $ between the letter I and 12. If you take a look at the lower left corner of the screen, there's now a $ between I and 12. Okay, we hit enter, and now we see that it calculates the percentage as 4.88. If we copy this cell all the way down, okay, we see that this percentage increases because column I is a running total. Okay, now the question was, let's go back to the question, extend the relative frequency table to determine, so we want to determine the percent of Expedia's bookings that are below $600, below $600. Okay, so that means if you take a look at cell F7, okay, that's bookings going all the way up to $599.99, so that's below $600. And in looking at J7 and cell J7, that is the percentage where the bookings are below $600. Okay, so that's 66.25%. And that is our answer, 66.25%. Okay, is the percent of Expedia bookings that are below $600. Okay, now let's go ahead and move on to the last example here. Here we have a list of Uber fees that are incurred at 80 different cities in the United States. And the question is, what is the percentile rank of a $13 Uber ride? Okay, so if we take a look at these prices, okay, in this chart here, we have various prices, and it's in increasing dollar order: $11.95, $12.10, $12.30, $12.50, $12.60, etc., and it goes all the way up to $20. Okay, now we know that there are in this chart 80 fees, right? Because we're told this is all across 80 different cities. All right, so I'm going to put a proportion here, and in the denominator I'm going to say it's 80, because there are 80 different fees here. And the question here is, what is the percentile rank of a $13 Uber ride? So what we're going to do is look at how many $13 are in this chart here, and we see that all of the $13 Uber rides are right in here. Okay, so we're going to count the number of cells here. So the quickest way to count this is to look at how many columns there are. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 columns that contain $13, and then how many rows? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there are 8 rows. So then the total number of $13 Uber rides is 8 times 4, or 32. Okay, so that becomes our numerator. And to find the percentage, we know that this is the equivalent of, if we factor out an 8, this is 4 divided by 10, which is equal to 40%. Okay, so that is our answer. The $13 Uber ride is, in terms of percentile rank, is 40%. Okay, so hopefully that made sense to you. If I went through this too quickly and you didn't quite pick up everything that I was showing you, please go back to the beginning of the recording and listen to this again. Thank you.